Welcome to your second lesson on circle graphs. Today we're going to be looking at drawing circle graphs. Now, one of the tools that will be very helpful for you is a protractor. The first question asks you to find the percent of students who use each mode of transportation to get to school. Then use a protractor to find the angle of each section. So first we're going to start by filling out the percentage part of our table that we have over here. So remember that when we are figuring out the percentage, we look at the little ticks on the side. You will have all of them. I just marked in kind of every 5 with red and every 10 with black so that it's easy to see. So my circle graph already has them written in because I used a different program to create it, but yours will not. So you can see if we started with, okay, walk is blue, so we go from here, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, and another group of 5, so that will make 55%. So we'll put that into our chart. Then we can look at biking, which is green. So if we start here, it goes 5, 10, so that would be 10%. Then we have the bus, which is in gray. Our legend tells us that, and we can count. So we go from here. This would be 10, 20, 25. And other is in orange. So we can count our groups. We've got 5, 10. So that is 10%. And if we wanted to double check to make sure that everything added up, yeah, we can go, okay, 5 plus 0 plus 5 plus 0 is 10. And then 1 plus 5 is 6, plus 1 is 7, plus 2 is 9, plus 1 is 10. If we add up our percentages, it adds up to 100. So we can be fairly confident that our numbers are correct. So the first thing that we're going to do with our protractor is to calculate what is the angle of this section. So our first item here is walking. So we're going to calculate walking, which is blue. So we are going to take our protractor and we're going to try and line it up so that the center matches the center of the other one. I know mine's not transparent in the center because otherwise you lose all the dots and lines. And we want one arm to match up with the side. The next part is we're actually going to turn our protractor so that it can show us the other leftover part. So I'm just going to line up my other arm here. Yours will like you better than mine will like me because yours is an actual object and not just technology. So now that I've moved it so that the center matches and this arm is there, we can see how many degrees are left to go from the 180, and we can start counting again from 0 to the edge of this one. So we see that it's just before 20. It's about 2 degrees before 20. You could use a ruler to kind of connect it to see where it goes. So if I go 180 plus 18, because that's 2 before 20, then that should give me about 198 degrees. If we look at our next section for biking, which is in green, I've moved the protractor to line it up, and I didn't let you watch that part because it takes me way too long. So if I look at where it ends, it matches up just past the halfway mark. So we go to 10, 20, 30, 35, probably like one more to get to 36. And so then that's what I will write in my chart. So now we have our protractor lined up with the gray section for busing. So if we look, that arm lines up at 0, goes to 90 degrees. So this part is 90 degrees. And then we've moved it to other, and so that is an orange. So we've got our bottom one lined up with the base 0, and the top part comes just after that 35 mark again. So we're going to call that about 36 degrees. And that makes sense because when we had 10% before, we said it was 36 degrees as well. So this is everything that was involved in just part A of question 1. We're also going to have part B, which we actually automatically did because that is how my brain works. So for part B, we'll ask you to add the percentages in your chart. So we'd have our 55 plus 10 plus 25 plus 10 equals 100%. So we know that all percentages add up to 100 to make a complete whole. So if it doesn't add up to 100, you need to go back and find your mistake. For part C, they're asking you to do the same thing, but they're asking you to do this with the angles in a circle. So if you added up 198 plus 36 plus 90 plus 36, that should give you 360 degrees. Now, I will tell you a secret. I know that it adds up to 360 because the first time I made this lesson, I said that walking was 200 degrees, and I videotaped everything else in this question, got to the end, added it up, and went, nope, that equals 362, so I got something wrong. So I went back and I fixed my mistakes and redid most of this video for you. So real life applications. Action bar is code for 10. Question D talks about how to go from our percentages to fractions. So they're saying that 36 degrees is 10% of 360, right? That's what our chart would say for biking and other. So to check this calculation, they want us to calculate 10% of 360 to see if we get 36. This is our goal. So the first step, and they give you a little reminder box on your page, is to change our percent into a fraction. And remember that of is usually code for multiplying. So 10% as a fraction, well, we know that to go from a percent to a fraction, the percentage is our numerator, and it's out of 100 because all percents are out of 100. So 10 out of 100, which is the same thing as 1 out of 10, right? Because we can divide both of these by 10. So this will be our fraction, and then we're going to multiply it by 360. So if we go 1 out of 10 times 360. Now, 360 is the same thing as 360 kind of out of 1, 360 wholes. So then we can just multiply across the top and the bottom, right? So 1 times 360 is 360, and 10, you can multiply by the invisible 1, or you can just leave it there, divided by 10, and 360 divided by 10, remember our fraction bar is code for division, right? So 360 over 10 is the same thing as 360 divided by 10, and both of these should give us 36, because we could divide both of these by 10. Okay, so this does give us the right answer. So remember, first step, change it into a fraction and then multiply it by the second number. So if you were going to do 25% of 360, you need to change this into a fraction and then multiply that fraction times 360. For question E, they're going to get you to look at each section. So if we looked at our bike section for our data, not for your actual page, our bike section was 10% and was 36 degrees. So they give you a little clue here with these symbols. So just put the right numbers in. So we had 36 degrees for our bike section, and that was 10%. So according to the bike section, 36 degrees is 10% of 360. You'll do the same thing for each of the other sections. For question F, they are going to ask you to check each statement from part E by calculating the percent. So we actually already did the math for this, but they're getting us to do what we did for part D that you have done for walking. So they want you to go, okay, 10% of 360 equals, and then you would do all the math to see if it equals 36. And if you have done all of your work correctly, then these statements should match up. Question 2, for each part, they're going to give you a chart or a table and a circle graph to fill out. So I'm going to start just by showing you the chart portion. I've used the same headings as one of your first example, but I have changed the numbers, so don't just copy these into yours because you'll need to use different numbers. So the first thing that you do is we need to figure out if this is the percentage, what would the angle in the circle be? So if I have 50%, I need to figure out 50% of 360. So 50%, our first step is we write it as a fraction, is 50 out of 100, which is the same thing as 1/2, right? Because we could divide them both by 50. Of becomes times, and our 360 will say the same. So 1/2 times 360 equals 360 divided by 2, which gives us 180. So it should be 180 degrees in the circle. And then we would find bioccasionally. So 20% of 360, let's draw a line to separate these. So 20% is 20 out of 100, and we can divide them both by 20, so that gives us 1 out of 5. So 1 out of 5 times 360 is 360 over 5, and then we can do some division to figure this out. So 5 can't go into 3, but it can go into 36 7 times, which gives us 35, and we have 1 left over, and so 5 goes into 10 twice. There's no remainder, so that would equal 72. So bioccasionally should be 72 degrees. Now, you could be sneaky and just figure out 180 plus 72, what else do we need to add to get to 360? Or you can calculate. So we could go 30% of 360. So 30 out of 100 is 3 out of 10. So if we did 3/10 times 360, that means we get whatever 360 times 3 is. So 3 times 0 is 0, 3 times 6 is 18, and 3 times 3 is 9, plus 1 is 10. So it equals 1080 over 10, and we can divide both of these by 10, so that equals 108. So it'd be 108 degrees. So you should go through and just make sure these all add up to 360 And they do, because 72 plus 108 is 180, and 180 plus 180 is 360. So they are then going to ask you to fill out a graph. So the first thing you're going to do is fill out the title. Now for the title, I actually look at what they say the survey result is, right? So if it's daily newspaper habit, then you could call it daily newspaper habits. You could also change the name up a little bit, but I think that is fine. Make sure every word in your title is capitalized, right? This is a skill that crosses over from language arts, but is still relevant as we're doing our work here. So we are going to be bringing our protractors back to help us draw our graphs. So we are going to try to line this up with the middle. I know my middle dot is invisible, but yours should be fairly visible. So once we have that lined up, we can look at our first one. So delivered to home, I've got 50%. So I know it needs to go from 0 to 180. Okay, so I have to work with what I've got. So you would put your lines there and then just draw a line going across here to make them match up. Now, unfortunately, it will not let me draw that way. So I have this weird ruler on here that lets me change the angles of things. So I'm just going to make sure that it is pointing straight across, and then I can draw my first section. So this is delivered to home. So I could just call this delivered. Now my next one needs to go 72 degrees. So you are going to take your protractor and line it up. Now I'm almost going to imagine this is the bottom. So this is at like 90. I need to make it go 72 more degrees, and then I'll draw that section. So if I was to line this up, here is my 0. I want things to go about 72 degrees. So here's my 70. I want to go 2 degrees away from that. So I'll make a little tick kind of at where the 72 degree mark. So that creates my next section, which is 72 degrees, which is that they buy it occasionally. And then the last section, that's 108 degrees. They never look at it, so they don't look at the newspaper. So you just need to use your protractor, line it up with the different parts to see if you can make it match up to those degrees, right? So just line it up, look from one to the other. So you could go from here down to there, and it should be about 108 degrees, and it's just before that 110 mark, so it is. This is what you're going to be doing for A, B, and C for question number 2. So this is just one portion. Question 3 is also going to have several examples, and they're asking you to take the original fraction and write it as an equivalent fraction over 100 and then as a percent. So if we have 4/10 and we want to make it over 100, we have to figure out what do we do to get from 10 to 100. So we need to multiply it by 10. Whatever we do to the bottom, we have to do to the top. So 4 times 10 is 40, and 40 out of 100 is 40%. When we go from a fraction over 100, our numerator becomes the percentage, okay? For some of these examples, it will actually require more than one step because our initial denominator might not be able to go into 100 in one step. So if we looked at 75, there's no whole number if we multiply it by 75 that becomes 100. But we can simplify this first. So to get from 75 to 25, we can divide it by 3, right? Because it's 3/4 that makes 75 cents. So once again, if we do that to the bottom, we have to do that to the top as well. So 24 divided by 3 is 8. And then we go from our 8 over 25 to 100. So 25 times 4 is 100. So we need to multiply 8 by 4, and that gives us 32. And then our numerator, if it's over 100, becomes our percent. So they'll give you several different examples. You just have to figure out how to get from one denominator to the next by multiplying or dividing. For question number 4, they're asking you to go from a fraction to an equivalent fraction out of 360. So if we have our denominator is 20, we have to figure out what times 20 equals 360. So if I kind of imagine there was no 0 on the end of each of these, I divided them both by 10. 2 goes into 36 18 times. So I could multiply this by 18, which means that's what I would do to my numerator as well. So 18 times 8 is, well, 8 times 8 is 64. 8 times 1 is 8 plus 6 is 14. And then this becomes our new numerator, which also kind of lets us know that this would be how many degrees this part would take up in a circle. So that would be kind of like 144 degrees. Just like when we were creating equivalent fractions to go to 100, sometimes this will require more than one step. So if we need to figure out how to get from 108 to 360, well, it's not a whole multiple, right? Because if we did 3 times that, that wouldn't give us 360, but it would be our closest equivalent. So instead we have to go from 108 to something smaller, and they've helped us out by saying that these two numbers, it can go down so that the denominator is 36. So first of all, I have to figure out how do I get from 108 to 36. Well, 108 divided by 36 is 3. So I need to divide both of these by 3. And 27 divided by 3 is 9. Now to get from 36 to 360, I need to multiply it by 10. So that's what I'll do to the top as well. So I'll get 90. Question 5 once again has several examples, or 2. I'm just going to go through with you how they found the information for the first example just for hockey. So they give you the kind of topic, the different examples, so like its favorite sport, the options are hockey, swimming, running, or other, and they give you the frequency, which means how many people chose each one. So 8 people chose hockey, 5 chose swimming, etc. Now we have to figure out the fraction of the total first. So in order to do this, we need to figure out our numerator and our denominator. So the part for this fraction for hockey is going to be 8 out of, and then we have to add up all the numbers in our frequency. So 8 plus 5 is 13, plus 4 is 17, plus 3 is 20. So this is going to be 8 out of 20. So that is where they got the 20 from in their fraction. The next step to figure out the angle of the circle is to take that fraction, and we need to make it into a fraction out of 360. Fortunately, we already used these numbers, so we know that 20 times 18 is 360, and then we have to multiply 8 by the same thing, which gives us 144. So it would be 144 degrees. Okay, so for swimming, that's our part, and 20 is the total number of people that answered the survey, and then you'd once again have to go from 5 out of 20 to something out of 360. So we'll multiply by 18, and I'll let you figure out what the answer to that is on your own, and then put it into the degrees. Then, just like we did in the other examples, give your graph a title. I'd probably consider something like favorite sport, and then use your angles to fill in the chart and figure out how big each piece of the circle graph needs to be. For this lesson, you are going to do pages 66 to 68, mark and do all of your corrections, and as always, comment on FreshGrade to let me know whether you need some extra help with this lesson. Bye!